Hello again, everybody. I'm Chris Mooneyham, and welcome to the TCA All Sports Report. As always, brought to you by Fox 5 Atlanta, 680 The Fan, and of course, the Touchdown Club of Atlanta. This, every year, our busiest show of the year, because of course, it's time for the recaps of the GHSA State Basketball Championships. All 14 of them. We'll give you at least a line or two of historic information and pertinent modern information coming up in What's Happening. Well, it is not, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I've been known to exaggerate from time to time. It's not broadcaster exaggeration or hyperbole to say that this year was, without question, one of the great state championship weekends in the history of the great state of Georgia. And that, of course, is saying something. Now, of course, I'm talking about on the basketball side of things. Of the 14 titles that were won last week in Macon, of the 14 titles, 7 were decided in the final quarter. And you could argue that 8 were, but 7 were certainly decided in the fourth quarter. 6 of which were decided in the last few minutes. And there is no question that 5 of the championship games came down to arguably the last possession of regulation, or overtime, as a matter of fact. We'll start our recap in the 6A classification with the boys. Wheeler beats Pebblebrook for the state title in an absolutely great ball game. Wildcats outscore the Falcons 9-3 in the final 4 minutes of the ball game as a top national player, Jaylen Brown, who will probably be an NBA player in just 2 years. Well, I say in 2 years, unless they change the rules, of course. He drives the lane and gets fouled, knocks down 2 free throws with .5 seconds remaining, and the Wildcats win the ball game. 59-58. Jaylen Brown, one of the top players in America, goes for 22 points and 9 rebounds. Would have had a bigger ball game, but he was saddled with foul trouble throughout the evening. 6A girls now, where the Lady Indians of McEachern win their 3rd title in the last 4 years and their 2nd consecutive title. Again, if you have not had the opportunity to see their victory over Archer in the state semifinals, you ought to do so. You'll also get to see Taya Cooper, one of the fine young female players in the entire country. She's got WNBA written all over her. McEachern outscores Norcross in the overtime session 8-1. So already we've got 2 very close late dramatic ball games. 5A boys. Pirates beat Buccaneers. Brunswick takes out Allatoona. Chris Turner and his Pirates pride themselves on their defense. They hold Allatoona to just 3 points in the 3rd quarter. 3 points in the 3rd quarter. 32 points total, and the Pirates win the state title. 5A girls, Stevenson brings the championship home to DeKalb County. The Lady Jaguars turn a defensive effort of their own in as they hold the Lady Raiders of Mays without a field goal until the 19-second mark inside the 4th quarter now. Inside the 4th quarter, they didn't score until the 19-second mark. And the Lady Jaguars turn a 48-46 lead into a 65-56 victory. To the 4A classification now, where the Jonesboro Cardinals have really niched their place in history with their 2nd consecutive championship. This one was in doubt late, 55-50, the final over Carrollton. MJ Walker, who is one of the top sophomores in the country this year. He was one of the top freshmen last year. He'll be a top junior next year. And I'll tell you something, MJ Walker, James Walker Jr., for those of us who have been covering him since he was in 8th grade, that kid will probably be a top 6 or 7 player in the country come his senior year. He goes for 21 total points against the Trojans, 8 in the final 2 minutes. Jonesboro wins their 2nd consecutive title. By the way, Tracy Hector Jr., in my opinion, one of the more underrated players in this state. He goes for 20 and 10 in the finale. The Lady Wolves of Buford win a dramatic contest. Their 4th title in the last 7 years, and Carrollton goes 0-2 in the 4A classification down in Macon as they miss 2 free throws, down by 1 with .6 seconds remaining. 3A classification now, where last week, we were off here at the All Sports Report, and I was very fortunate to be in Columbus for the play-by-play of the 2A and 3A boys and girls state semifinals. If you haven't had the opportunity to see the boys games on the 3 side, I'm begging you to go to the NFHS network and check out at least the second halves or the 4th quarters of each of those ball games. The stage was set for high drama anyway. We had 4 teams ranked inside the top 5. We had number 1 Laney taking on the defending state champions in Morgan County. Now, I'm going back to the semifinals before I get to the championship game here, so stay with me. because it builds the drama for the state championship game. Laney, number 1 in the state, taking on the defending state champions led by one of the best players in the country in Tukey Brown. Tukey goes for 32 points in the second half, 32 of his 37 as a matter of fact, and the defending state champions rally against the number 1 team in the state, once down by 9 in the second half, and win that semifinal contest to get back to Macon. Now, who would they face? The nightcap, the 8th game that we called... You had to know it was going to be a classic. The 8th game that we called in a 2-day stretch featured, quite simply, folks, perhaps the greatest comeback I've ever seen. Perhaps the greatest comeback I've ever called, anyway, that I've ever called live. Jenkins led Rutland 64-48 with just 5 minutes to play. 64-48, 16-point lead, 5 minutes to play. By the time we reached the 1-minute mark, which it seemed like it took 20 minutes in real time, Rutland claimed the lead. That's right, over the next 4 minutes, Rutland outscored Jenkins by 17 points. And wouldn't you know, as sports are so often to do, Rutland ended up giving up that ball game, and Jenkins ended up winning it just the same. So, Jenkins, number 2 in the state, faced Morgan County, the defending state champions inside the state, and Jenkins wins a dramatic affair where Eric Johnson hits a layup at 2 seconds, and the Warriors win their first state title in program history. We had some drama on the 3A side, at least in the semifinals, and when I took the mic for the play-by-play of those semifinals down in Columbus, one of our main talking points was the success without a state title for the Wildcats of Laney, the Lady Wildcats, who had reached, pardon me for forgetting the number exactly, 6 or 7 consecutive semifinals without a state title, and had appeared in only the 1 state title game. Well, they won in Columbus, and they also won in Macon. Aaliyah Collier would not let her team be denied. In fact, in the state championship game, 70-55 victory over Beach, Aaliyah Collier goes for 24 points, 19 rebounds, 19 assists, I'm sorry. No. Now that would be unbelievable. 24 points, 19 rebounds, 8 assists, 7 steals, and 4 blocks. You can understand my confusion. Look at those numbers, 24, 19, 8, 7, and 4 in their 70-55 victory over Beach. In the 2A classification, UGA commit Jordan Harris, who was really good down in Columbus when I had the chance to see him, was even better in Macon. He goes for 41 points, 11 rebounds, 6 steals, and 4 assists against Crawford County, and the Indians of Seminole County are the state champs. Undefeated and nationally ranked Holy Innocents on the 2A girls side had a chance to be a state champion, yes, but a nationally ranked top 10 team, if only they could get past the modern dynasty that is Wesleyan. Wesleyan wins their 11th title in the last 15 years. In fact, over the last 15 years, Wesleyan has 11 titles, 3 runner-up finishes, and 1 Elite 8. Absolutely unbelievable run, the great modern dynasty that is Wesleyan. Their 11th title comes via a 45-31 victory over Holy Innocents. Speaking of a team that's looking like a dynasty, 1A private boys, St. Francis wins their 2nd consecutive title in their 3rd consecutive state championship game. Back in 2013, they lost to Green Forest. But they win their 2nd consecutive title, and now most people who cover this sport for a living have kind of realized and formed the opinion this is one of the great small program teams, this individual single season team, and I guess last year counting as well, in state history. They have 4 major Division I prospects. They beat Green Forest 96-81, as I mentioned, for their 2nd consecutive state title. That victory by the boys pulled off the double dip as the ladies of St. Francis won the state title as well. That was perhaps one of the best championship games we've seen in a long, long time. They faced off, first of all, with Southwest Atlanta Christian Academy, a very well-known, decorated program in the lower classifications. I had the opportunity last year to cover St. Francis and Southwest Atlanta Christian. This matchup, they've met something like 14 times over the last 4 years because they played against each other in the region. Then they play each other in the region tournament every year. So that's 3 matchups right there. And then they would always, over the last few years, they've met a 4th time in the state tournament almost every single year. And this year, These two highly decorated programs meet in the state championship game. Southwest had possession and was running down the clock for a last-second shot in a tie ball game. They tried for a lob pass inside right at the free throw line. The pass was intercepted by Maya Dodson with 7 seconds left. She dished off to a little point guard who pushed up the court. Clock still running. The Lady Knights then headed down the court on that fast break. That little point guard drove in, had the ball stripped out of her hand. It came rolling down in the paint, and who's there to pick it up but Maya Dodson, the lady who had intercepted the pass down on the defensive end of the court. She picks up the loose ball, lays the ball up off the glass, and the iron, and in at the horn. And St. Francis wins the state championship at the gun, 47-45. 1A private boys, how about the storyline for Calhoun County? They beat Greenville for the 1A boys public title with a bucket by a kid who didn't even play in his first ball game until the region tournament. Kid tore, Dejon Williams suffered a broken leg. That's what it was during the football season, I forget. He hits a running floater, the game winner, right near the gun with about a second left. 84-82 is the final. And then finally, I mentioned the great dynasty that is Wesleyan, their 11th title in 15 years. They became the first team to win 11 state titles, but they weren't the last. Why? Well, let me take it a step further. I mentioned that Wesleyan is the great modern dynasty in girls' sports history in this state. And arguably, I got to be honest with you, perhaps the greatest championship run in the history of this state, regardless of gender, classification, or sport. But I digress. We'll talk about that another time. Perhaps the most dominant all-time dynasty in any sport, besides Valdosta football, is the Lady Vikings of 1A basketball, Taylor County. They win their 11th title in program history. The Lady Vikings, let me find it here, sorry. Yeah, from 1968 through 1972, they won 5 consecutive state championships. In fact, if you go down to Macon and you go to the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, they have their own little display. They have their own little display from when they had the 5-year championship run there from 68 through 72. They win their 11th title by taking out Turner County, 67-54, the final. So now, since 1968, 11 state titles for the Lady Vikings of Taylor County. Congratulations to those young ladies. Positive Athlete Georgia, we want to remind you folks, is looking for nominations for boys and girls high school athletes during the 2014-15 school year in 26 different sports. You'll also have the opportunity to nominate coaches for the Positive Boys and Girls Coaches of the Years for your school, your county, or the statewide awards. The school supporting the program with the most quality nominations will receive the Positive High School Award of the Year as well. The deadline for nominations, we talk about the Positive Athletes every week here on the All Sports Report, and we want to remind you one more time, the deadline for submission for nominations is March 31st, the very end of this month. We got about 2 weeks remaining. Award winners will personally receive Positive Athlete shirts and certificates signed by Hines Ward at a celebration in June of 2015. I had the opportunity to interview Hines. What a great guy. So great that he's a part of this program, not just here in the state of Georgia, but up in Pittsburgh where the program originated as well. Thousands of dollars in scholarship monies are also up for grab. Nomination forms can also be obtained by emailing Positive Athlete Georgia at nominations@celebratepositive.com. That's nominations@celebratepositive.com. And of course, for further details, you can go to georgia.positiveathlete.org. Remember, you can be a family member, you can be a friend, you can be a classmate, you can be a coach, or you can be a teammate. It does not matter your relation to the young person for which you are nominating. Just go to georgia.positiveathlete.org for further details. Coming up next, in our Ever Wonder portion of the program, we do as we always do and take a trip back into time. Georgia high school football with a tale of 2 recruits. This week's Ever Wonder portion of the program is a great historic nugget. I love when Brad reaches back into the wheelhouse of my late high school, early college days. And in this week's portion, it's 1996. And we talk about two of the finest running backs in our state without question, most likely 1 and 2, and really two of the best running backs in the entire country. When you talk about two guys whose high school careers paralleled each other, their college careers were exactly the opposite, and their after playing days have actually flip-flopped with each other. This is, as he likes to call it, a cautionary tale of two recruits. In 1996, the top two running backs in the state of Georgia were Jasper Sanks of Carver Columbus and Jamal Lewis of Douglas High School. Now Sanks, his junior year, his finest year, went for 2,000 yards and 23 scores. Meanwhile, Jamal was going, for Douglas High School, of course, was going for 1947 and 29 scores. And Jamal, by the way, in 1996 was a TCA back of the week. As the legend has it, and I believe Jim Donnan has actually rebuffed this story and denied it, but you'll remember that the Dogs had a loaded backfield in 1996. Of course, that's debatable, but Robert Edwards, Olandis Gary, Patrick Pass, and they had some other guys there. A little shifty Robert Arnaud, remember? Okay, so anyway, Brad, I love that Brad brings up this story because I heard this story back then as well. Most of us did who covered sports. The story was that Donnan wanted to make sure that he got one of those guys, Lewis or Sanks, and so he decided to put all of his attention on just one guy and had to choose one guy. Now, Brad doesn't mention it here, but there's also a rumor out there that one day in his office by himself that Donnan flipped a coin. It landed and decided that it was going to be Jasper Sanks. He came out of his office, went straight to his recruiting guys and said, okay, we're going after Sanks. The coins have spoken, or something to that effect. Well, they did, and obviously they landed Jasper Sanks. And as Brad likes to say, Jasper's career, well, it was unceremonious at best. His 4-year career, and this is exactly what Brad has to say, was marked by injuries, weight issues, failed drug tests, and disappointment. In his 4 years at Georgia, he accounted for just over 1,700 yards of total offense and only 13 touchdowns. And of course, in November of 2000, new head coach Mark Richt kicked him off the football team for a third strike in the university's drug policy. And Brad goes on to say, despite his size and speed, Jasper never received an invite to the National Football League Combine or an open tryout with any NFL teams. And so his playing days were over. The college career, of course, for Jamal Lewis, very much the opposite. He had a productive, even if not an All-American type college career. He, in 1997 as a freshman, 1,300 yards and was first team All-Freshman SEC. He played for a total of 3 years at UT, and a lot of people would forget, including yours truly, and I'm glad Brad brought it up, that Jamal still to this day is 4th all-time in all-purpose yards for the University of Tennessee. He, of course, went on to play 9 seasons in the National Football League, where he helped Baltimore win the title in 2000, and, of course, he eclipsed that mythical 2,000-yard mark in 2003 when he was the National Football League's MVP. So, two paralleled careers in high school couldn't have been more opposite in college. But then the coin flipped yet again into their private lives. Of course, Jamal had the far more successful playing career, as Brad likes to point out, but since then he's had his difficulties. He was convicted in 2004 for possession with the intent to distribute and served 4 months in prison. 3 years after his retirement in 2009, Jamal filed for bankruptcy, and he's also been part of the lawsuit with the National Football League involved with the CTE, the post-traumatic syndrome, and the concussions and all of that. Meanwhile, Jasper Sanks has seemingly rebounded from his lack of production in his playing days, his rise and fall on the football field. The AJC recently just had a great article on Jasper and reports that he lives out in Texas and is working in the oil industry and is happy and married. Of course, the reason Brad brings this up this week is because it is, again, a cautionary tale, as he likes to say. And I'm quoting now when he says, for a great deal of these highly touted and revered high school football players, as it relates to the football field only, they've never had to be accountable or go through any adversity. He goes on to say they can just show up and be better than everyone else, and no one knows how they will react when they run into better competition or run into nagging injuries and adversity. Some rise to the occasion and thrive, while others simply wither away. Coming up next, another look at the GHSA calendar. We play sports on the Georgia high school calendar for 10 consecutive months, April through May, as you all know out there. But did you know that we crown at least one state champion in 8 consecutive months? Through the last weekend of October, all the way through, well, the last weekend of May, or generally the last weekend of May. The reason I bring that up is because that's the focus of the What's Next portion of our program, championships moving forward in the state of Georgia. There is no question that the most exciting month on the Georgia high school calendar is the month of May, and that the spring season is without question the most highly decorated portion of the GHSA sports and championship calendar. So, now that the basketball championships are out of the way, we can all kind of sit back, take a deep breath, and relax a little bit, loosen the tie. You can see I've already loosened this button on my shirt here. But in all seriousness, we kind of get this, I don't want to say dead period, and I hesitate to use the term lull, because all of the spring sports have now started, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago in the All Sports Report, and we're firmly entrenched in the regular seasons of every spring sport. But this is our opportunity now to kind of take a step back, kind of lean back in your chair, pull out your laptop, get in front of your computer, your tablet, or whatever, and peruse the myriad of sports that we have across the Georgia high school sports landscape. Again, we will crown champions in April, but only 2, riflery the first week, gymnastics either the third week or the last week, and that's when it all really starts to explode, because that's when the spring sports, the other spring sports, will really begin their playoff run. We will crown champions in May, in baseball, in lacrosse, in soccer, in track, in tennis. Did I say golf? Golf will crown their state champions as well. The month of May, the month where I don't get to see my wife. I'll be traveling all around the Empire State of the South, working on one job here, the next job, the next. I really am going to have to be sharp and focused. The month of May is, without question, the most exciting month in the entire on the entire Georgia high school calendar. And of course, keep in mind, as we do every year here on the All Sports Report, we will, starting next week, start to focus on some of the pertinent young men and women, some of the pertinent teams, some of the great storylines, leading up to immediately into those playoffs and championships. The spring season is always so darn dramatic here in the state of Georgia. Okay, coming up next in my take, I try not to alienate any of my officiating friends. This week's My Take portion of the program, a very sensitive subject, and one that I really don't like to talk about, but I think it needs to be brought up, because I've had a lot of people mentioning it to me, and I've noticed it myself. First of all, the officiating this year across Georgia high school basketball, and in the semifinals that I happened to see, and others that I've watched since they've come to a conclusion, were not as good as they should have been. The officiating was subpar, and I hate to say that, especially out loud. But the play by the young men and women of Georgia high school basketball in these same ball games, in these same sites across the season, was also subpar. And it is, without question, linked. The two are, without question, linked. How hard is it for a part-time official to officiate a sloppily played basketball game between two teams that they've never seen before? It's extremely tough. That's why a lot of people who cover Georgia high school athletics can give these men and women who officiate these games a pass, because so many of these kids don't play as fundamentally sound as they used to. A lot of the kids still hustle like they used to. They get on the ground, they get dirty, they get tangled up, and we end up with a lot of scrums at the free throw line or on the baseline, or kids diving into the crowd. And for that, we applaud the young men and women. But we also end up with a lot more over the backs, bad shooting, so loose balls, big time rebound plays underneath, and less than fundamental plays than we've grown up seeing, than any of us have ever seen. Also, a lot of the pay rates for some of these officials throughout the various states have been cut. Some of the jobs have been cut. Some of these men and women have to officiate, if they want to do it for a living, a D2 game one night and a high school game the next night, or 3 games in a row, or at least a doubleheader. Many of you by now know the story of Swainsboro and Holy Innocents in the 2A boys state tournament from this year. This is an exact opposite example of what I was just giving. This is a mistake that absolutely positively can never ever happen. Swainsboro comes down the court in a tight ball game in the state playoffs and gets fouled. A gentleman goes to the line, misses a free throw, but the scorer of the ball game accidentally gives Swainsboro a point for a missed free throw. Now, there are controversies like this. We've all seen them throughout high school sports. Some of you have probably been involved in them. This, not a controversy, not hearsay, it actually happened. That when Swainsboro missed a free throw, the official scorer gave them that point by mistake. Now, the reason we know that it actually happened is because there is visual evidence by the crew that was filming for Holy Innocents. They caught the scoreboard down on one end. Swainsboro went down. We saw the play unfold, and by the time they came back down, Swainsboro had too many points on the board. They appealed with the GHSA to try to get the game overturned, or at least get the game to continue from that point. But the GHSA said, look, we've got rules in place. We cannot change this thing. Why? Because the officials had signed the official scorebook and booked it out of Dodge. Now, should that one official be to blame? I don't know. Should all the officials be to blame? I don't know. The point is, this brings up the subject of regular officials across Georgia high school athletics. Perhaps having these guys and gals all connected, working on regular shifts, regular rotations, for perhaps more pay. I'm not going to continue to ramble on here because, quite honestly, we're 4 minutes into this My Take segment of the program, and I could go on for 14 more minutes. But my point is that this is another opportunity for us to discuss the situation, for us to analyze the situation, and potentially clean it up. It's tough being a high school official. It's tough being a high school player, fan, broadcaster, or coach. There are a lot of impurities in our high school athletics. But what our goal always is and always needs to be is to limit those impurities and those mistakes as much as possible. And in doing so, maybe we can focus on the officiating and the problems that revolve around the officiating. Pay raise? I don't know. Better play? I don't know. But something has got to change. Until next week, I'm Chris Mooneyham for the TCA All Sports Report.